Hello everyone, in this video I'll be solving some of the SQL interview questions which were asked in a top fintech company. These questions can help you to get a visibility and idea on what type of questions, what level of questions you can expect in a SQL interview for any analyst profile. So either you can follow me along in the video or you can solve this question on your own, and later you can watch my approach on how did I proceed with solving this particular questions. That will surely help you. Without wasting much time, let us directly move on to the questions. So don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't. So let us jump directly to the next screen. So friends, you can see here two data sets I am having. So into the first data set I have just the users. So into the first column of the user data set, you can see I have the user ID. Into the second column I have the sign up date. For example, user number 1 is sign up date was this, the user number 2 the sign up date was this. So I have this first data set of the users. The second data set I have is of the transactions which are done by these users. So you can see here into the first column I have the transaction ID, into the second column I have the user ID, into the third column I have the created at. Now what is this created at? So for example, whenever we are doing a transaction, let's say in Google Pay, so the time we are initiating the transaction, so let's say we are entered our UPI pin and the time we have initiated the transaction, so that timestamp or the date is being noted here. Into the fourth column you can see the updated at. Now what is this? So after the transaction it is successful or it has been failed, like the very last final status of the transactions which we are doing or the users they are doing, so it is being noted here. So all of these dates they are being noted here. You can see the status of the transaction, whether the transaction was a failed transaction, successful transaction, you can see here into the status column, and the transaction amount which was done by the users. You can see it is mentioned into the last column of the transaction data set. Now from this I want to solve these three problems. Now these three problems they were asked into the round 1. So we'll be solving the very first problem. The very first problem says write a query to find all the transactions done by the most recently signed user. Now I've imported both of these data sets into my SQL Server Management Studio. You can see here I've just imported exactly the same data set. I'll just execute it once here also. So friends, the very first problem, it is saying to gather the information, write a query to find all the transactions done by the most recently signed user. So how can we know who is the most recently signed user? So from this user dataset, so I'll just remove, so this might confuse, so I'll just remove this column. So from this users dataset I'll just pick up the max sign up date and the user ID corresponding to the max sign up date. So with that I'll be getting the recently signed up user. So let us do this, and after that I'll be joining it with the transaction status column, and we'll be getting the all the transactions which have been done by the most recently signed up user. So friends, let us start writing the query. So I'll just get the maximum date whichever is present into this particular column, the date column, from customer, and let us see what is the output this is generating. Okay, so we have got a maximum date. So I would write here select user. So I'm getting the user who has recently signed up. So I'll just write here select user ID from customer where date, and I would write this date is equal to, or I would write is in this. Let us execute the query. So you can see we are getting the user ID as 3, and the user ID 3 is the recently signed up user. Now there are many ways to solve this particular problem. I'm just solving using the very simple formulas which we have learned till now. So I'm just using the very simple formulas and the very simple query so that it can help a lot of different people who are just starting out with SQL. You can use the rank function and the various other things also to just get from a single query, but I'm just doing with the help of very simple functions right now. So here I have got the user ID. Now let us join this particular output which we have got with the transactions dataset, so that we can get all the transactions which have been done by the most recently signed up user. Or if I would say, there is a very simple procedure, we could use that also. So instead of joining, we can just use the same logic which we have used here. So we can just provide a where customer user ID in, and I'll be providing this into the subquery. So let us do this. So I would write this select user. Okay, I'll just do here select star from transactions where user, what is the column name, by the way? I'll just check. Where user ID in, and I'll provide this into the subquery. Let us execute the function. So you can see here I'm getting all the transactions which have been done by the most recently signed up user, and the most recently signed up user is the user ID 3 customer. So friends, this is how we have solved the very first problem. It is a very simple one. How we could have solved this using the join. So the concept which I was telling was, so I would just copy this code, paste it here. Let us see what is the output it is generating. So this 3 which we are getting, I'll be taking this into account. So I'll just do here select a dot, and I would write here select a dot user ID from this a inner join. So I would do a inner join transactions on, and transactions is, let's say, b a dot user id is equal to b dot user id. So this would also produce the same results. Now this we have done using the join function. Okay, I'll do here b dot, I would have to mention all the column names of the b data set. So I'll just write here b dot created at comma b dot transaction id b dot status b dot updated at, and b dot I think I have included everything. Let me just cross check this. Status updated at user id. Yes, I've just included everything which is required. So I'll just execute the code again, and you can see I'm getting the exact result of the user ID 3, which is the most recently signed up user. So this is how this problem needs to be solved. Let us jump to the second problem, and it is saying write a query to find transaction IDs of the second highest amount transaction done by all the users. So we are having 3 distinct users here, user ID 1, 2 and 3. Now all the transactions which have been done by all of these different users, we want to get the transaction ID of the second highest amount spent, or the transactions done by these users, the second highest transaction done by each of these users. I want to generate the result. So into my output we'll be having 3 rows, and each of the row would contain information about a customer, and in each of the row the customer and the second highest amount transaction with the transaction ID, it should be mentioned. So this is the output which we need to generate. Let us start solving this particular problem. So we will be using the rank function here. So I would do here select, we'll be using the transactions dataset, select star from transactions and I'll do here a rank over partition by. So onto which column do I need to partition by? Since we need to get the second highest amount spent by each of the customers, so we need to partition our data set for each of the customer. For example, if I would just if I had to explain this, so I would just do or explain this here into the Excel sheet. So first of all, the data I would pick up for the user ID one. So this is the data set for the user ID one. I'll move to a next sheet. Now I'll be filtering out the data for the user ID 2. This is the data for the user ID 2, and this is the data for the user ID 3. So I would just select here a 3. I'll control C and control V. So these are the different partitions which I need to create into my SQL query also. And you can see here for user ID 1 a partition has been created. For user ID 2 a partition has been created. Like this would be created internally, so I'm just displaying it here to explain you guys the concept into much better way. So these are the partitions which we need to create, and from these partitions I need to pick up the second highest transaction amount. So no, I would just put this. So this is the, and this is the reference, and I would fix the reference. So you can see I can do just the same thing into the Excel also. So Excel would rank all of these transactions. So you can see this is the second highest transaction amount which is done by the user ID as one. So similarly we can do for all of these users. So I'll be using the rank here also. The number, the reference, so the reference range is this one, and I would have to fix this. I would extend this. So similarly this is the second highest amount transactions which have been done by the user ID as 3. I'll again use the rank function. This is the number and this is the range. So this is a very useful function which we can use into the Excel here. So I would just hit enter and I would extend this formula to the last. So you can see here I'm getting a 2. So that is the highest amount transaction, second highest amount transaction which is done by the user ID as 3. So this is kind of the output which we need to generate. So our output would contain 3 rows. One of the row is for the user ID 1, the second row is for the user ID as 2, and the third row would be for the user ID as 3. So this is the kind of output which we need to generate. I hope I have displayed this into much more better way, much more simple way, and I was able to explain this concept of the partition by into much better way, and how we are solving this particular problem with the help of the rank function. Now instead of rank, I guess we need to use the dense rank function. And why do we need to use that? I would request you to watch my advanced SQL playlist. So I've explained that into much more better way. I've covered all the rank functions, so I would request you to watch the rank playlist or the advanced SQL playlist. So I would write here dense rank over partition by the user ID column and order by the amount column, and this should be into the descending order, that the highest amount order gets the rank as 1, and we'll just be filtering out the rank 2 from all of these partitions which would be created. So you can see here I filtered out the rank 2 values here, all the partitions which have been created. So this is the kind of logic which I'm applying here. So select star comma dense rank over partition by user ID order by amount descending. I'll rename this column as rank. Let us execute this query. So you can see a rank has been provided. Now I'm only concerned with the second highest amount transactions which have been done by all of these users. So I'll just write here select star from this. I'll rename this where rank is equal to 2 Let us execute the query. So you can see here we are getting the exactly the result which we were seeing into the Excel. So this is how we are solving the second problem, getting the second highest amount transaction which is done by all the users. So friends, let us cross verify. 351 for user id 1, 233 for user id 2, and 385 for user id as 3. And this is exactly the same results which we are getting. So friends, this is how we have solved the second problem. Let us move to the third problem, and this is quite interesting one, and this is asked a lot of many times into the real interviews, but into the round one only they have asked such a high level kind of complex problem. So what is the problem it is saying? So it is saying write a query to add a column, and the column name is cumulative amount, to transactions done by a user at every transaction id, without using window function. Now friends, what does this problem it says about? So the output which we need to generate here is kind of, so I'll just do this. I would just copy this data set for transaction to just show you what is the kind of output which we need to generate here, and it is being asked here. So let us move back to the problem once again. Let us try to read this. So write a query to add a column. So the column name should be cumulative amount to transactions done by a user at every transaction id without using the window function. So at every transaction id for each user, I just want to get the running sum. In other terms, if I would have to say it into simple terms, I want to get the running sum what they have asked. So write a query to add a column through transaction done by user at every transaction id. So this is the cumulative amount column which is all about. So the output which it should look like would be something like, so I would just copy the same data set here from here. Okay, but yeah, let us just simply copy this. So this is for the user id 1, this is for the user id 2, and this is for the user id 3. So I would copy paste this column here also. So friends, you can see here, this is my transaction id column and all of these transactions. So I just want to add an additional column, and this column it should be the cumulative amount, and the output which we want here is something like, so total amount which have been spent by the user. So from the second row, I would just explain this, and m2 should be fixed here. So this is the kind of output which we need to generate. So you can see here I'm getting a column which is the cumulative amount column, and the output it is being generated here. Similarly for all the other let's say customers, I want to get a cumulative amount which is being done by all the different customers. So I would just select the range here. M11 should be constant. This should be M. So this is the kind of output which we need to generate for the user id as 2. Let us see what is the output which we need to generate for the user id as 3. So I would do this sum m16. I would just keep this as constant, and I would drag this formula to the very last to get the cumulative amount. So this is the final column which we need to generate for the third problem, and at the last all of these data sets would be kind of, you could say all of these data sets would be kind of joined vertically, and this is the kind of output which we need to generate. So this is the final output which we need to generate for all of these different users, and an additional column has been created. This column is known as the cumulative amount, and we are doing this for all the customers separately. So the problem, it was saying write a query to add a column, so we have added a column to transaction done by a user at every transaction ID. So friends, this is the kind of output which we need to generate, and we need to do this without using the window function. This is a complex constraint which they have provided into the problem. Now if I would have to solve this problem using the window function, it was quite simple for me. Let us see how to solve this problem with the help of a window function, and then we'll be seeing to solve this problem, or how we can solve this problem without using the window function. So I would just write here select star comma sum over amount over, I'll be again partitioning by the user ID. As you could see, we have created different partitions for different users. So, and here I would need to provide here rows between unbounded, preceding and current row. Also we need to order by, so order by onto the basis of the transaction ID. This is the cumulative amount column which has been created by us from the transactions dataset. Let us execute the query, and it would produce exactly the same result which we have produced using the window function. So this should be corrected row, and this is correct. I'll just execute the code. So friends, you can see I'm getting the same result exactly what we had got earlier into our Excel sheet. So I would just copy this result and present this into the sheet 4. I'll paste this result here. So if you would see, I'm getting the same result. To verify this result or to cross check, I would just display this. So you can see I'm getting true into every cell. That means I'm getting the exact result using the window functions, though they haven't mentioned to use the window function, but I'm just showing you guys how we could have solved this problem using the window function. But we need to solve this through the alternate procedure. Now how we can solve this problem without using the window function, let us see. Before writing the code, I would just simply try to explain the concept which I'm trying to apply here. So I would do a self join. I would join the same table with itself, but with multiple condition. What is the concept which I'm trying to apply here? So you can see here I have created multiple partitions, or I had rather created multiple partitions here. I would just paste this into a separate sheet, the multiple partitions which I had created. So these are the different partitions for the different customers ID. I would explain for a single user right now, and the same concept you can apply for the different users, and that is how the code internally it will work for all the different users. Let us see how the logic I would need to create here. So I would just copy the partition, or you can see the transactions for the user ID 1 for now. I would need to do a self join, so I would just copy paste the same data set which I have copied here, and you can see this is the partition for the user ID 1, the transaction the user ID 1 has done. Now I'll be doing a self join. I'll be joining the same table with itself, so I have just copy pasted it 2 times. Now what is the condition on which we want to join both of these tables? So you can see one more time the question. I'll just read it out. So we need to write a query to add a column cumulative amount to transactions done by a user at every transaction ID. So at every transaction ID I need to get a cumulative sum. So the transaction ID here, it is mentioned into the ascending order, and the kind of output which we need to generate here is something like mention this. So f1 should be fixed. So this I have discussed into the previous sheet, but here I'm just doing it once again. So this is the final column which should be generated for the user ID as 1. So let us see how to do this. So the condition which I need to generate here is, so let us say this is data set 1, this is the data set as 2, and we'll be doing a self join. And what is the condition on which we'll be doing a self join? So the condition is something like d dot transaction id should be greater than equal to d2 dot transaction id. So this is the condition on which we'll be joining both of these data sets. Now friends, let us see. I would just explain for a single transaction ID what would happen, and you would simply relate with that particular transaction ID. So I'll just pick up a random transaction ID for now. For example, let me pick up the transaction ID this. The concept which I'll be applying here, the same concept internally, the SQL query, it would function. So the same concept, it will be applied for every customer, for every transaction. So I would request your attention here right now. What is the concept which I am trying to do here? So you can see here the condition which I have mentioned here is d1 dot transaction id, it should be greater than equal to d2 dot transaction id. So all those transaction IDs which are greater than this 7, the transaction ID here is 7. So all those transaction ID which is greater than 7, it would join with this particular row of the very first table, that is the d1. So for d1, this row, it would join with all those conditions where this particular condition is met. So d1 dot transaction id into this particular case for this row is 7. So 7 should be greater than equal to, so wherever this condition would met, it would join. So you can see here all these 3 rows, the condition is being met. So I would just copy and paste all of these 3 rows. Also you can see here I mentioned greater than equal to, so obviously the 7 number transaction ID would also come up because it would match. So I mentioned here greater than and also equal to. So these are the 4 different rows which would be matched with this particular row into the d1 data set. So I would just copy paste and copy paste. So this is the kind of output which would be generated. Friends, this I have shown for a single transaction for a single customer. The same thing, the same concept would be applied for different customer for different transactions for themselves. One more condition would come up here, and that would be the customer ID should match. So d dot customer ID, I would just mention this here, d1 dot customer ID, this should be equal to d2 dot customer ID. So these 2 different conditions, it should match, but we are not concerned with that right now because these 2 partitions, or you can say these sections, they were just for the customer ID as 1. After this, we'll be grouping onto the basis of the multiple columns to get this result, to get the sum of this result. So which all columns will be using to group by this particular data set? So we can use the date column first of all, and the second column would be the sum column. So the sum which is mentioned into the data set as 1. So this 2 columns will be using to group, also the user ID column obviously. So these 3 columns will be using to group by, and will be using the sum function to get the sum. So the final output which would be generated for the customer ID would be Control C, and at the very last column I'll be doing a sum of all of these values after grouping by. So this is the final output which will be produced. So you can see here the outputs, they are kind of matching. So I hope the concept is very much clear now. So I would request you to watch this video again if you had found this concept kind of confusing. This is a very important concept to learn. If you want to learn more onto the same concept, you can watch my non-equijoins video. I made a detailed video with a lot of different problems onto the non-equijoin. I believe all of those problems would help to clear these concepts onto the non-equijoins. Let us write the query to solve this particular problem. So I would write here select. So first of all, let us get everything, a dot star, b dot star, from transaction A, join transaction B on A dot transaction ID. It should be greater than equal to, as I mentioned into the Excel sheet. You can see this particular condition. I'm just writing it right now. So it should be A greater than equal to B dot transaction ID, and also A dot user ID should also be equal to B dot user ID. Just execute the code. So friends, this is the output which is being generated. So if I would just do a control A, control C, and if I would just cross verify the result which is being generated from our SQL query with the result for the 7th number transaction ID, as you can see here. So I would just filter out the data for the 7th number transaction ID. I would just select here 7. So you can see here 4 rows are being produced, and this is the output, or this is the kind of logic which I was trying to display here or explain you guys. So after this we have gotten this particular thing, I'll be just grouping by onto the basis of certain columns, and I'll be getting the desired result which we want to generate here right now. But before this, I'll be changing the name of the columns because the code might get confused, or we'll be doing certain changes here. So I would just remove this star from here, and I would rename this amount AMT. That would do the thing. I would just execute the code again. So yes, we have got the desired result. Let us just cross verify from the Excel sheet. Just paste this code here. So yes, our thing is very much clear now. This into a subquery A. So I'll just write here A dot user ID comma A dot updated at A dot amount comma A dot AMT. Let us execute the query. Let us also get the transaction ID column here. Transaction. Let's execute the query once more. So friends, this is the kind of output which we have generated. I've added some more extra columns here, and I'm just executing the codes. So what is the concept after this which we need to apply here? So as discussed into the Excel sheet, we'll be using the group by function to group by on the basis of certain columns. So we'll be using the 3 or 4 columns to group by. So let us see how to do this. So I'll be first be using this group by function, and I'll be grouping by onto the basis of these 4 columns. I have explained this into a lot of more detail previously to the Excel sheet. So if you are having doubt now also, so you could simply watch the explanation which I've done into the Excel sheet. So I would do a sum over A dot amount. So the very last column I'll be summing it over, and this column, the name is cumulative amount, and let us execute the code. So friends, you can see we have got the answer. Let us verify. So for some of the users, for some of the transactions, whether the answer which we have got is correct or not. So for the transaction ID as 7, user ID as 1, the cumulative amount is 1120. So if this is correct or not. So transaction ID 7, user ID 1, the cumulative amount is 1120, and that is pretty much correct. Let us verify for some more. So for user ID as 3, transaction ID is 12, the cumulative sum is 859. Let us verify this also. So it is 859 12 and 3. Yes, this is also pretty much correct. We are getting 859 as the cumulative amount for user ID 3, transaction ID as 12. So friends, this is how we have solved the problem without using the window function, using the non-equi joins. Believe me, non-equi joins is a very interesting concept if you would understand this particular thing using the different logical operators which we have applied here. So friends, I would request you to watch my advanced SQL playlist if you hadn't watched till now, and also like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. So meet in next video. Thank you so much, and I hope this video was quite informational and useful to you. So thank you so much. Bye.